Hello and welcome to another episode of Lab Insider. Now we're talking with people from all over the industry, whether it's academia, whether it's non-governmental organizations. We're always fortunate to talk to someone with a perspective from the private sector. Here with us from Covestro in Germany is Frank Wahl. Welcome.
Hello, Max. Thanks for having me.
Frank, before we get into our discussion today, you are a LIMS program manager.
Yeah.
Do you mind telling us a little bit about that?
A couple of years ago, quite many years ago, we started something we called a LIMS at Covestro program, which means we try to identify the possible users of LIMS within the Covestro ecosystem, and started then implementing them one after another. So that is basically what we call the LIMS program. And I'm still in charge of identifying who's able to use the LIMS and who will use the LIMS and what's the sequence of implementing and all that stuff. So that's the reason why I'm called the LIMS program manager, besides other roles I have within the IT currently.
For someone just entering into the subject of LIMS, because if I were to Google LIMS, I'm going to find a lot of the major producers of this software, and I'm going to understand it as a very recent product, but it's actually got quite a legacy. It's been around for quite a while.
It's been around quite a while. Our starting point was 2009, I think. And by that time, LIMS was a well-known product for different suppliers. There are a couple of them out there in the market. The big ones, the obvious big ones, Thermo Fisher, Advantage, Starlims, and how you name that. And so we decided in a selection process back in 2009 or 2008 it was, who was the provider for us for our LIMS at Covestro program. In these times it was named LIMS at BMS because then we still were biomaterial science. That has changed. But yeah, it is a well-known product. It has developed over time, and it's quite known for managing laboratories in the past. Yeah.
Some might say it's actually synonymous with the transition to digital processes in the lab, really bringing up the Lab 4.0.
In part, I would say the original intention of LIMS or having LIMS implemented into laboratories was not really the real digitalization part. It was more or less a necessity to make sure that we were able to handle all these samples that have been placed in Excel sheets or what you can think of, file shares, to manage them in a more proper way and get the workload handled better than before, because LIMS helps you a lot in structuring your workflows and structuring your processes. It in parts forces you to do things more efficient than it has been done before. The digitalization part was basically a spin-off out of this, which came over the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years.
And that includes the automations of processes, the autonomy of digital instruments.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you made we talked a little while back, and you touched on a really just mind-blowing point that the biggest LIMS provider in the world isn't one of these Google results that you find. That
is basically a fun part. When I'm asked who is the biggest LIMS provider on this planet, I always mention Microsoft. For very simple reasons. If you check into laboratories who are currently not utilizing LIMS, what are they mostly using is Microsoft Excel. They're shifting around Excel sheets over file shares and share them with other employees and all that stuff. And the newest versions within Office 365 didn't even make it better. It made it worse, because nowadays you're able to work in parallel on a document. Multiple people are working on the same document, which leads sometimes to the situation where you even do not know what's the actual status of the document. So yeah, I'm always saying the biggest LIMS provider on this planet currently is Microsoft still, I would assume.
I mean, I can definitely speak to the obvious flaw there is when you're sending emails back and forth and you're sending that static document, and all you're doing is just adding, I don't know, version 3.1, 3.2, 3.7. Eventually someone skips an email and the wrong data gets communicated. That, on the other hand, there are live functions these office programs, whether you're using Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel. But is that still enough of a challenge for existing LIMS solutions?
It is. People tend to stick to the well-known solutions they have in place. They are working since many years, and often enough you get the response, why changing this? It works pretty well, and our employees and our colleagues are well used to this, and why changing this? The hurdle of, I would say, the activation hurdle is sometimes quite high. Once you have shifted away from these static documents into a active working LIMS system, for instance, you won't get away from you don't want to get away with it anymore. So we have the situation now that we had you have always had downtimes with your LIMS implementations, obviously, because you have server maintenance, application maintenance, and all that stuff. And this is coming to an issue nowadays because shutting down the systems for 2 hours creates issues in the laboratory, which is differently than it has been before.
When you say these shutdowns, sometimes, I mean, you know, in a perfect world, obviously a shutdown is communicated ahead of time. Everyone is prepared, but this isn't always the case.
We're talking about IT systems. If you would like to have a 24/7, 365, 100% availability, you have to invest a lot of money. Then we're talking about redundant systems, hot standbys, and all that stuff. And then you have to have a business case calculation. What happens if your system is down for 2 hours or 3 hours? And what is the invest you have to make sure that this is not going to happen? And I personally do not know a company who is doing this on a high availability, because what I always say is you have to have a backup plan in your laboratory. You can't insist that your system will be 24/7, 365. You will have to have downtimes, even if they are communicated up front because of sort of maintenance and all that stuff, or even if you have a disaster case. You never know, but you have to have a backup procedure and make sure that you're still able to pick up the phone. To make it simply easy, just pick up the phone. There's a sample missing, there's a label missing, there's a result missing. Just pick up the phone and communicate. I see the tendency that that people try to rely on the IT systems to 100%. They don't communicate that much anymore because they say my system is working. If the label is not coming out, I don't pick up the sample, which is not good. So that is a constant challenge to communicate that in the laboratories and in the production areas, of course.
I think they call that complacency, or just maybe just simply being in one's comfort zone.
Yeah, right.
Obviously, there are culturally people work differently, but actually closer to home, age maybe plays a factor as well. When someone's a seasoned employee and has worked in a particular process for many years or even decades, is there a higher likelihood that these kinds of mistakes can take place?
I wouldn't call it a mistake, though. And of course, it might be a reason that you are an aged person who's working since 25 years in the same procedures and the same workloads and all that stuff. It's getting better over time. Even the seasoned, not the aged, the seasoned persons are getting adapted to the new technologies quite sooner than they have been in the past. That has changed over the last couple, I would say 5 to 6 to 7 years also, because digitalization is nowadays a topic which is pushed through all organizational units. Everybody's talking about that. And even if you are a lab technician who is doing the same stuff for 25 years, you can't get away with it anymore. So that is actually changing, and that is improving massively over the last, as I said, 5 to 6 to 7 years.
The implications to instant analysis, I mean, there are unlimited possibilities for companies. The business cases are everywhere, but there's a thing that you mentioned, because essentially what we can extract from this is it's a solution that's almost a miracle for the modern lab. I would imagine that for someone who's been working manually with pens and paper or even Microsoft Excel suddenly gets wind of this concept, will almost think, no, it's too good to be true. And you did mention that there are people who, despite having all the information available and pre-analyzed for them, they won't believe it until they see it in a specific form. I think it was they just have to see the real sample. Is that correct?
In former times, it was really the case that that touch and feel thing was sometimes a thing in the laboratories, or quite often a thing in the laboratories. Just relying on data because some of the lab technicians are producing data. Let's keep that pH value, for instance. Yeah, but I would like to see the sample itself. I would like to see how it behaves, how it feels, how it smells, whatsoever. And that was one, I would say minor, but that was obviously one of the reasons why sometimes in laboratories people are reluctant to just rely on data that has been produced in what kind of system whatsoever. But also this, especially nowadays, due to the pandemic and due to the change of working style that we have, home office and all that stuff, we have been forced to change the mind, though. So that is also going away slowly. You still have the need, though. I'm 100% on the same side to say sometimes I would like and I have to see the sample itself because the data is simply not enough. But in most of the cases, that is going to change also over time. Yeah.
Why do you think that is, actually? Do you think there's an emotional attachment, or is it just some, I don't know, just a habit that you've been trained?
It's a combination of both, I think. The first of all is, I do have a lot of history on myself. I was working in a laboratory for 17 years, so I know what it means if you have a sample in your hand, because besides the data that you have, besides I'm stressing the pH value. Besides that pH value, you have a sense for the sample itself. Even if the pH value might be correct, and even if that is the quality measure that you have to provide a sample to create a sample or create a product for your customer, you know something is wrong with that product. I can't say what, but I feel it, and that is something. Yeah, sometimes emotionally, especially for the colleagues who are working a long time in the laboratory with the same product at the same time, so they know exactly how a sample should feel. And even if you say, well, the numbers are correct, you have the colleagues, and I'm very proud to have those colleagues who say, might be, but there's something wrong. And then if you deeper dive into analytical methods, additionally to the quality measurement, then you see, oh, yeah, see, there is something wrong with the sample. And that is something emotional, that is something you can't put into numbers.
I guess, in spite of all the technology and all the analysis that will be essentially handed to us through LIMS solutions, I guess instinct is still necessary. It's still a prerequisite to having your career.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, that shouldn't be the case, but you have, especially in production areas, you have the colleagues who are 25 years or 30 years in the same production area. They touch a bottle and they know there's something wrong. Even if the measurements are right, the temperature might be wrong and the temperature readings for the sensors are not correct, but they have a hand on the bottle and they know exactly there's something going wrong. And that is exactly, that is not going to go away. We need exactly these kind of people in the production areas, in the laboratory areas, to have an instinct connection to what they're producing.
Obviously, skills will need to align with these new realities. So while some responsibilities are now being, taken over, what do you think would be the skills necessary to sort of complement application of LIMS in the lab?
Yeah, that's a general IT understanding, I would say. Working in a lab, where I started working in a lab, the IT was not existent, period. So there was no need to have an IT knowledge. That has changed massively over the years, of course, over the decades, of course. Nowadays, you have to have a general understanding of IT. You have to have, from my point of view, a general understanding of what is the system doing at the end of the day, what is LIMS doing, what is the purpose of LIMS. And of course, we do have our key users, which are extremely well trained, who are basically able to maintain their own instances by themselves. Master data, for instance, they are able to maintain the master data by themselves. That is nothing that's going to be done by central IT anymore. So general IT knowledge, general knowledge about the usage of the system, the purpose of the system, general knowledge about the interfaces, where is my data flowing into, which I'm producing, that is definitely a plus. And for the key users, I would say a must-have.
Obviously, as the years roll by, the baton is passed to a younger generation of lab leads. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that they're prepared? Do you find that their attitudes and their skills match that of the lab requirements?
Yeah, not only that the skills match. What they're doing is they're pushing us. They're pushing us quite a bit, because we are talking to a generation nowadays who are digital natives, and they out of a sudden realize if IT systems are not behaving the way they should be, they're intended to be, they are out of a sudden notice there's something going wrong. So they're pushing us also with functionalities. They say, well, I have this and this and this application for my private use. And why is that system that I'm using for my professional use that complicated? Make it easier, make it more comfortable, make it more reliant, what you can think of. And that has changed due to the fact that we get younger people into the laboratories in the production area. They know exactly what they are expecting from the IT system.
There is that's sort of a Bill Gates mentality, really. There was that saying that he says, if you need to find a solution to a problem, just ask the laziest person. Exactly. They will find that the shortest distance between A and B. You did mention there are fundamental problems that exist sometimes in labs that need to be solved. And I've mentioned this on several episodes of Lab Insider. One of them was with Olivier Chevalier, where he said that a lack of uptake of technology in at least in academia means that information is kept within departments and is not collaborated, right? There are these silos of information, but that transcends into industry as well, as far as I understand.
Basically, you have the same situation, of course. But I would say the laboratory within huge environments is some sort of a part of the production area. And of course, the idea of production is to produce as fast, as much in the best quality I can for my consumers, for my customers. And then the laboratory is in the middle, basically, because they're measuring. I still stick with the pH value of 7.1, which means the product is not be able to be sold to the customer because the boundary was 7.0. So there was some rivalry in the past sometimes, and that has definitely changed over the last years. That there are more and more cooperative working together. The communication has improved because the production colleagues know now exactly where the data is coming from, when it has been improved, when it has been produced, by whom it has been produced, who is the contact I can call at the end of the day if there's something wrong. So that silo or fence, I wouldn't say silo, I would say fence thinking. Mm-hmm. Is disappearing more and more and more. It's basically, at least within Covestro, I would say it's not existing anymore. Of course, you have always the production guys that say, no, the pH is 7.1. My Jesus Christ, why? Just make it 7.0. Of course you have that, because they are forced to produce as much as they can. But the communication has been improved through the implementation of IT systems, not only LIMS, but also these communication things that we are using right now, Teams, for instance, Microsoft Teams, for instance. They're communicating more than they did in the past. That has changed.
Has it? I mean, on the one hand, it has made communication smoother. Mm-hmm. If I have the will to share information with you, I can send it to you in an instant. But in some cases, it does take a certain mindset, a way of thinking. Yeah. And you mentioned Covestro in particular takes pride in the fact that your employees think over the fence, because you mentioned this fence thinking, but thinking over the fence. Can you take us through that a little bit?
Well, thinking over the fence means at the end, we do have several business entities, high performance materials, high performance polycarbonate, coatings, adhesives, specialties, polyurethanes, and all that stuff. And the idea is now that, in former times, it was the case that everybody was thinking that is my data. The data that I am producing is my data, even within the company. And that has massively changed. We are now implementing methods and applications and procedures to make sure that basically these data are able to be shared. Because a pH value, and I'm stressing pH value, I know that a pH value is a pH value, regardless where you are producing this. And you never know if even in one business entity, we are creating data which could be used in other business entities. You never know that. And that's the reason why we basically are currently in the process of combining all of these produced data into analytical platforms and into analytical solutions to see what is the real value of that data. Are these trends? Can I see trends? Can I see even better though? Is it possible to create new products out of these data just because I have the data? Artificial intelligence is something like this. Quantum computing is something like this that we are currently using. So that has changed. The usership of the data is not me anymore; it's the company, and that has also quite an impact, I would say, for the company itself and for the quality of IT solutions that we are providing right now.
I think, it's important to remember that anything, as in the creative industries or in manufacturing, anything that's produced on site using company resources is effectively and ethically the proprietary of the company. So it's surprising that there were people who had their own personal interests in keeping data secret.
I wouldn't say that is not company specific. I'm pretty sure that this is or was in the past the situation in all of the companies you are talking to, because my data is my data. I produce it. And we had those discussions in the past to provide data to other instances and to other business entities, to other systems and whatsoever. We're not talking about data restrictions when we're transporting data to other countries, though, United States, China, whatsoever. That's a legal thing. But keeping the data myself because they're important to me, and we're not talking about patents and all that stuff where it makes sense to keep the data by themselves. We're talking about production data and all that stuff, analytical data. And I would be very surprised if that is would only be affecting Covestro, though. I'm thinking that is basically was a schema for all the companies I can think of.
As a final thought, what kind of outlook do you have for the sharing of data and the application of LIMS?
For the application of LIMS, I'm pretty sure we are going to implement more systems than we have today. I'm pretty sure in the, I would say, mid-future, if you are going to build a laboratory, you can't avoid to have LIMS. Using sheets, using paper, you can't do that anymore. That Pandora's box has been opened. I'm pretty sure that the information flow will be improving over time, that data flow will be improving, data sharing will be improving, and I'm also pretty sure that the value of the data will be seen much clearer than it has been in the past. In the past, it was just data that has been stored in whatsoever location you can think of. I think, and I hope actually, that this will be seen as a value, that we can do something with that we're not just producing data just because, that we are producing data because we can do something about that. And that is, I'm pretty sure that will be in the not far future. That will be in the mid-future, even in the short future, yeah.
Frank Wahl, LIMS Program Manager for Covestro. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
That was Frank Wahl, LIMS Program Manager from Covestro, giving us his insights on LIMS implications and applications. Join us next time for another exciting episode, but in the meantime, be sure to like and comment on any aspects that you like about this episode and wish for us to improve. And don't forget, subscribe to our newsletter for premium access to full extended episodes. That's it for now. Take care.